Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I hope everyone can see my screen clearly. Okay. So, welcome everyone to the continuing discussion on the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We are first session on the first chapter last week, and we covered through the first 12 verses, where we were setting up the scene for Bhagavad Gita to be spoken. Basically, Bhagavad Gita begins with inquiry from Dhritarashtra to Sanjay, who wanted to know what's going on the battlefield, and we see a description of Duryodhan first approaching his guru, and then he's describing the strength of the opponent army, and then he's also describing strength of his army. And after doing that analysis, and he's sharing, what he observed with his guru Dronacharya. That's where we ended the conversations. We'll continue the conversation discussion from that particular point. So before we begin, does anyone have any questions or comments from the previous discussion? Okay. By the way, if during the session at any point in time, if you have any questions or concern, please feel free to stop me. Also, if you think I'm going too fast, also let me know right at that point in time, and I'll slow down. There were some sections where we were just describing the names of different warriors, Kshatriyas on both sides, on the sides of Kauravas and side of Pandavas. So that particular description did not have much philosophical aspect to discuss, and so we might have gone through those portions relatively in a faster pace. But again, any point in time, if you feel if you don't understand, or if I'm going too fast, please do let me know. Okay. So having said that, let's continue on. Last time we ended at verse 12. So I'll quickly, in a brief minute or two, I'll describe what we discussed on verse 12, and then we'll move on from verse 13. So in verse 12, basically, after Duryodhan completes his description of the strength of the Pandava army, and then he also describes the various warriors on his side. He ends that conversation basically by, first of all, saying that he is confident that we would win the war because we have Bhishma on our side, and then so that others don't feel that they are less important, he gives them encouragement on his side by saying that, hey, by the way, though Bhishma is very powerful, you need to make sure that you need to protect him from all sides. He might be be very focused in fighting with a particular opponent, and he might not be aware of what's going on in the surroundings. So he was just trying to act as a diplomat. And after that, Bhishma basically starts blowing his conch to signal that the war is we are all set and war can begin. So the particular description that is used to describe how Bhishma blowed his conch shell is referred to as Simha Nadam Vinadya. So Simha Nadam means the roar of a lion, Nada. And Simha, Nada means roar, and Simha means lion. And Vinadya means sounding. So the same word is used again in a different form. So Simhanadam, Nadam appears in Simhanadam, and Vinadya is also comes from the same root, Nad, is saying vibrating or sounding. So when you translate into English, basically it means that when Bhishma blowed his conch, it made a sound like a roar of a lion. So if you look at the word, it's in the way it is phrased, it's very peculiar. It does not say that Bhishma blowed his conch like roaring of a lion. He did not say that the conch sounded like a roar of a lion. What it made is he made a sound like a roar of a lion. So difference is, you could use a metaphor where it says, he roared like a lion, right? So that means he actually, when you hear that roar, you feel like that lion is roaring. That's one way of saying, right? He roared like a lion, but that's not what it is saying over here. What it's saying is that his conch made a sound which appeared like a roar of a lion. So what it is referring to is that Bhishma Pitama, right from the beginning, he knew that we are not going to win. So he, just to give Duryodhan joy, see, just to lift up the spirits of Duryodhan, and because he had taken a vow that, whoever is going to be in this post, I'm going to serve this post for all my life. And so, he's doing his duty, but he's definitely not happy either with Dhritarashtra or his son Duryodhan. And so unlike other wars that he had fought in the past, and he was a Atirath. Atirath means, so there are different words. There is a Maharath, there is Atirath, there is Ardharath. A Maharathi is one who can fight with 10,000 archers single-handedly at the same time. And Atirath is someone who can fight unlimited archers simultaneously and single-handedly. So Bhishma was a Atirath, and there are very few Atiraths. So Bhishma, he had fought many wars, and when he has nothing to be fearful of, nothing to be afraid of, but he, right from the beginning of the war, he was half-hearted. He was not so excited, but he just to keep up with the protocol, he made a sound as if roaring like a lion, but it was not, he was not giving his full into it, because he knew that you're fighting for the wrong cause, and there's no way Duryodhan and his army is going to win. So that is the import of this verse. Otherwise, it would have only said Simhanadam. It doesn't say Simhanadam. It says Simhanadam Vinadya. It's sounding as if like a roar of a lion. So why we are mentioning this? It will be apparent in the subsequent verse, where the different metaphors are used when the Pandava army now starts blowing their conch shell. So Bhishma first blows his conch shell. Now the Pandavas would blow their conch shells, and this is like signaling the beginning of a war, right? So traditionally, when when the wars used to begin, just to inspire passion in the Kshatriyas to fight, right? Fighting requires a lot of passion. So there used to be bards who would sing, or they would play drums, and this is like the war cries essentially. And it also has a psychological effect on the opposing army, right? When you have those war cries and loud roaring sounds. So in the subsequent verses, we'll see what kind of metaphors are used for Pandavas, and then we'll see how that compares to the metaphor that's used for Bhishma, and that this will give us indication on what's the outcome of the war would be. So having said that, let's move on to the next verse. Verse number 13. Tataha sankhascha bheryascha panavanaka gomukhaha sahaseva hanyanta sasabdastumulo abhavat. Translation. After that, the conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, horns, all were suddenly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous. So it's describing how everyone, all the warriors on both sides, they started sounding their drums and bugles and trumpets to basically war cries to signal the beginning of the war. So here's I have some commentaries from previous acharyas. Just want to see if they made any specific comment. So this is from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's mentioning, he's just describing the different kind of drums. So, Panava is a type of a drum, Anaka is a cattle drum, Gomukha is a type of a trumpet. So Gomukh literally means the the head of a cow, right? So we look at how a cow's head look. It's broad at the back, and then it's a little bit narrow in the front. So if you look at a trumpet, when you blow a trumpet, it basically, the part where you blow is narrow, and then the front part is wide. Now there are different shapes of trumpet, but this one particular looks exactly like the mukha, or the mouth of cow. So that's a little footnote there. Moving on to verse number 14. Tataha sveter hayyer yukte mahati syandane sthito madavah pandavascheva divya sankho pradadhamatu. So you see here the word divyo is used. So divyo is specifically divine. Let's read the translation. On the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. So we see that the conch shells of Krishna and Arjuna, the conch shells themselves were transcendentals. We don't see again that metaphor when Bhishma blowed his conch shell, right? So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned, then in contrast with the conch shells blown by Bhishma Dev, the conch shells in the hands of Krishna and Arjuna are described as transcendental. Sounding of the transcendental conch shells indicate that there was no hope of victory for other side, because Krishna was on the side of Pandavas. So in the end, the very last verse of Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya says to Dhritarashtra, he says, Yatra Yogeshwar Krishno Tatra Partha Dhanurdaha Tatra Sir Vijayo Nitir Dhruva Matir Mama. He says, wherever there is Sri Krishna, right? And wherever there is, who is this Sri Krishna? He is Yogeshwar, Yatra Yogeshwar Krishna. He is the Lord of all mystic yogas. And Arjuna, who is a Dhanurdhar, who is expert archer, wherever these two are present, there would always be victory. There would always be fortune, and there would always be morality. So in the end, this is the last verse of Bhagavad Gita where Sanjaya says this. Similarly, in the beginning, Srila Prabhupada, right, just by the indications, the transcendental omens, they are already giving indications that victory would be on the side of the Pandavas. So many times, those who are expert, they can look at subtle things and they can predict the outcome of an event, right? So in the Vedic culture, there is this deep, very deep science of omens. Now, omens, they are generally misunderstood. Over a period of time, what people have started, misunderstanding omens as something as blind faith, or what we say in a lot of Indian language is andhashraddha, where people think that if particular thing happens, or a particular event or an omen happens, that event in itself would cause a particular favorable or unfavorable outcome. That is not the case. It's not that the omen is the cause of the outcome for any activity. The omens are the outcome is sort of, it's known. It doesn't mean that it's already predetermined, but just like a teacher, an expert teacher, when he looks at his or her students, and because the teacher has been teaching for a long time, they know what the omens or the symptoms of a student are. They can look at a student and they can, even before the student appears for the test, the teacher can say, well, this student is going to pass or is going to fail. So it's like that. It's not like pre-decided, but those who have vision, they can foresee just by looking at the symptoms. So similarly, for anything, in the Vedic culture, those who have the vision, especially those who are astrologers and who have the ability to see the different messages, divine messages, which one can observe in the nature is trying to tell you. Nature is trying to communicate to the astrologer what the answer to the query is. So if someone approaches an astrologer and says, tell me, what lies for me for this particular scenario, or a very specific question. And at the time, not only looking at the chart, an expert astrologer can look at the omens surrounding oneself, and then based on that omen, the astrologer can say what's going to happen. Like there's an example, if somebody approaches an astrologer and then asks a question about whether I'm going to be able to beget a child or not, right? And at the time, traditionally, these astrologers are living in a very natural environment, and while looking at the chart, so he might build an astrological chart, a prasna kundli, and while analyzing the prasna kundli, he can also pay attention to the posture of the person who is asking, how he is asking, what's happening in the surroundings. And suppose he sees in the nature that maybe birds on a tree, they laid an egg, and the egg just hatched, and a baby bird just came out, and that's an indication, a strong indication from the nature that the answer to that query that he could use and tell to the responder that, well, yeah, this time you can expect to have a child, right? I'm just giving an example, but the science of omens is not that the omen is causing the outcome to happen, but there is already a certain set of flow of events that have already begun, and just like an expert teacher can tell that whether the student will most likely pass or fail because he knows the symptoms. Similarly, the symptoms are already there for something that is more probable to happen, not that the omen is causing those things to happen. So similarly, we are seeing these transcendental omens on the sides of the Pandavas. So that's how we should understood. Also, there is some description specifically about the chariot that Arjuna was using. So the specialty of this chariot was gifted to Arjuna by Agni, and was pulled by white horses. So the story is that when the Pandavas, they were given this barren land, Khandavprasth, which is the present day New Delhi, but there was none, or the old Delhi. There was nothing over there. So even if you go to old Delhi area, there is a Purana Killa area. Those are considered to be remnants of Khandavprasth, the ruins of Khandavprasth. So when the Khandava pressed, there was nothing. There was just forest and barren land. So the Pandavas, with the help of Agni, they actually burned down the entire forest before the land could be cleared up for further construction. And when the forest was being burned, there was Maya Danav who was hiding in the forest, and the Maya Danav was saved and he was obliged. So he said, "How could I help?" And they took Maya Danav's help to build a magical palace in which there were many mystical things, like land would appear as water or water would appear as land. So anyway, at the time, Agni, when they helped the Pandavas, the Agni, the demigod of fire, also gifted a chariot to Arjuna, and that's what the description of the chariot is given over here. So in this regard, let me see if there is any further commentary. Yeah, he's mentioned that special nature of the chariot given by Agni himself. Yeah, the peculiarity of this chariot was that it had great power and could conquer all the three worlds. So not only this Bhumandala, but upper heavenly planets and the lower nether regions where the Asuras live. He could conquer all those places just by this. Yes, using this chariot, it would go everywhere. So this was awarded to them when during the Khandava forest incident. Chariot was given to Arjuna and Chakra was given to Krishna. So there is some note over there. Oops. Okay. It's the same book, 14th. Reading to the next verse. Any questions on this so far? Verse number 15. Panchajanyam Hrishikesho Devadattam Dhananjayah Poundram Dadmo Mahashankham Bhimakarma Vrikodaraha. Lord Krishna believed his consul named Panchajanya. Arjuna believed his called the Devadatta. And Bhima, the voracious eater, and the performer of Herculean tasks, believe his terrific consul named Pounder. So here we see that there are different adjectives being used to describe even the warriors on the Pandava side, right? So Arjuna is referred to as Dhananjaya. So Dhananjaya is the conqueror. Dhan means is wealth, and Anjaya is winner of the wealth, right? So when Maharaj Yudhishthir was performing Rajasuya Yagya, so Rajasuya Yagya is a Yagya that a king who desires to be the emperor of the entire world has to perform this Yagya. So to be able to perform this Yagya, either the king should have the support of all other kings on the planet, not just planet, but I think it also includes other parts of the Jambudvipa. So it's not just the Bharat Varsha or the Bharat Khanda, but much larger area beyond Bharat Varsha. So other parts of Jambudvip are included in it. So they send a horse, and the horse actually goes across these different lands, and the horse is followed by an army. So wherever the horse goes, the kings either accept the supremacy of the king who is, desiring to be the emperor, or if not, they can challenge the king and they have to defeat him. So Yudhishthir actually had got the support of all the kings of across Jambudvipa, and then there were some asuras or evil-minded kings who were not supporting Yudhishthir, and then with the help of Krishna he was able to conquer them. So there is the example of Jarasandh, where Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima, they go to conquer him. Then Salva was killed by Krishna. Shishupal was killed by Krishna. So now the only opponent that was left was the Kauravas. And while he conquered all these kingdoms, Arjuna basically, he conquered all the wealth. So, it is already, this is basically, going into job or an interview, and you describe the qualifications of the person. So here the qualification of Arjuna was that, well, he has already conquered all the land. This is only the final opponent that is waiting. So he's not an ordinary warrior. So that's why this specific name is used. So any time in scriptures, whenever a name is described, it's not that they are randomly choosing any name. So Arjuna is also known as Savyasachi. I mean, they could have used Savyasachi over here. Savyasachi means one who is skilled in many different arts. So what it means is that Arjuna was the only Pandava of the 5 brothers who could use all kind of weapons with equal ease and expertise. Though his preferred choice of weapon was a bow, so he was an archer, but then he was equally expert in use of other weapons. But so that's what Savyasachi means. But here he's not referred to as Savyasachi. Here is referred to as Dhananjaya. That means he already conquered, so many different kingdoms. So anytime a particular name, if a person might have many names, but when a particular name is used, we should understand that it has a meaning which is very relevant to the context of the discussions. Currently the discussion is about the qualifications of different warriors in terms of their ability to influence the outcome of the war. Then Bhima is referred to here as the one who performs Herculean tasks. So he is son of Vayu, and Vayu, as we know, wind, is the source of all power, extremely powerful, and he's also a voracious eater. So it is said that Vrika Udara, he's voracious. Bhima has, particular kind of Agni in his abdomen, which is so strong and powerful, it can consume the entire universe. So for that Agni to be subsided, he needs to consume large quantities of food. Just like, when we are sometimes very hungry and, it might even cause us acidity. Like we have all these bile juices and, they are like really waiting for the food to come. But if the food is not provided, then, it can cause certain people some kind of acid reflux. So Bhima in particular had a very strong fire or Agni in his abdomen, and he was a great performer of Herculean tasks. And the names of the conch cells are described. So Krishna's conch cell is Panchajanya, and Arjuna's conch cell is Devdatta. Now in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a detailed description of the pastime around Krishna acquiring the conch cell Panchajanya. So what is described is that, if I remember it correctly, Krishna and Balram, they were studying at Sandipani's Muni Ashram in Ujjain, which is in present-day Madhya Pradesh. At the time, Sudama was also there. And as a Guru Dakshina, Sandipani Muni asked that, can you bring my son who died a long time ago back to life? And so, he said that he was devoured by the ocean. So he goes to the ocean, and the Samudra, the demigod of ocean, tells him that, well, there is this demon called Panchajanya, who is a conch demon in the sense that he resides inside a conch cell. So Krishna goes into the depths of the ocean, and then he kills that demon. But he does not find his guru's son within the belly of that demon, and so finally goes to Yamraj, and then he's able to retrieve the son and bring him back to life. But then he takes that conch cell, and then that becomes his paraphernalia. So from an external perspective, it seems at this particular point in time is when Krishna acquired that conch, and then he started using that conch. But we should understand that Krishna is not an ordinary person. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And just like, we'll learn later in Bhagavad Gita that though he might appear as an ordinary person in the sense that he is two-handed, unlike Vishnu is four-handed, and he's, in Vrindavan, he's exhibiting the pastimes of just a small child, a cowherd boy who is running around. People might mistake him as an ordinary person, but he's not an ordinary person. His birth and activity, they are divine. They are not like any ordinary person. Like when Krishna appeared, first he appeared as a four-handed Narayana form to Vasudeva and Devaki, and then he showed his normal two-handed form, just to show that, it's not, because people might have doubts, not that Devaki and Vasudeva had doubt, but people might question the authenticity, or like anyone can claim to become a god, but Krishna is saying that my nature is divine. So similarly, all the paraphernalia of Krishna, so he's holding Sankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, they are not inanimate objects. They are actually persons. They have two hand, a personal form. In the end, when Krishna departs and goes back to spiritual world after all the Yadus are killed, his chariot rises up in the skies, and all his paraphernalia, including Sankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, they assume their human form, and with folded hands they approach Krishna, and they bow down to him, and they request Krishna to ascend the chariot, and depart again for the spiritual world. So we should understand that they are eternally associates of the Lord, and they are persons, they are not inanimate objects. So sometimes, we might, because our conditioning, when we hear this description, we might think, oh, it's just a concept. It's not an inanimate object, and it's not that it was acquired. It might appear that it was acquired at a particular point in time, like in this particular pastime where Krishna is going and killing that Panchajana demon. But we should understand that even before that, the conch shell was always in possession of Krishna, right? It's in the sense that it's an eternal associate of the Lord. Any questions on this so far? Okay. The other thing to understand over here is Krishna is referred to as Rishika Isha. So Rishika means the senses, and Isha means the controller. So Rishikesha, another name of Krishna is Rishikesha. We break it down into two words: Rishika, Isha. One who is the controller of the senses of his devotees. And in this regard, what it means is, as you will see in the subsequent verses, Krishna is personally present to guide Arjuna in this battlefield. As his charioteer, he is going to control and direct the horses to drive the chariot across the battlefield as Arjuna is fighting. And similarly, the senses are also compared to the horses. So in the Upanishads, it's described that our body is like a chariot, which is pulled by the senses. Right? So suppose I'm walking down the street, and if I hear some nice music that's coming from maybe a restaurant, like, okay, maybe this nice music, let me go in there. Maybe and my nose might smell nice food, nice aroma, and the desire might come in that, oh, let's cancel other plans, let's enjoy this nice dinner. And similarly, the eyes might see something and they're attracted. So similarly, our chariot-like body is being controlled by our senses. The senses, whatever they like or whatever is pleasing to them, they dictate to they basically dictate the body what needs to be done. So I think there is a nice picture. Let me see if I can find it. What is horses? Chariot analogy of the soul. It might be easier to understand. We can find it. BBT, Bhagavad Gita. So basically, I think you get the idea. If I find the picture, yeah, here it is. So we look at this particular picture over here. You see, like, there's one sense organ that is described on each horse. So you have the eyes, and you have nose, and there's tongue over here, there's skin. And so these horses, they are compared to the senses. The intelligence is a driver. The intelligence is trying to control the horses. And the mind is compared to the reins. So the reins are the ropes which connect the horses to the driver. So mind is passive. And the one end of the mind are the senses. So mind gets different ideas and thoughts. Do this, do that, whatever the senses tell. Just like the ropes are pulled wherever the horses go. But the intelligence has to control the mind and the senses, just like the driver has to control the horses, right? And where is the soul? Soul is a passenger who is only experiencing the ride. So if depending on the circumstances and situations. So that's the analogy that's given. Maybe we'll discuss in much more detail at some point in time. But the idea is that here Krishna is personally present, just like he's directing the horses of Arjuna's chariot. He is going to be present to personally direct Arjuna with the senses of his devotees. So that is the significance of this verse. So let's see what Srila Prabhupada says. So Lord Krishna is referred to as Rishikesh because he is the owner of all senses. Living entities are parts and parcels of him, and therefore the senses of living entities are also part and parcel of his senses. So because we are all parts of Krishna, that means when we are part of Krishna, our senses are also part of him. So he has a direct control. If he desires, he can directly control and influence the senses of all living entities. But specifically, he takes interest in directing the senses of his pure devotees like Arjuna. And the Lord is situated in the heart of all living entities. He directs their senses, but he directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. And in case of pure devotee, he directly controls. So that's the difference. So somebody might question, well, why is Krishna not controlling my senses? Well, it depends on our surrender. So the extent to which we take shelter of Krishna, to that extent, Krishna takes charge of our life. Just like Prahlad, he was not at all concerned about losing his life. His father Hiranyakashipu was bent on killing him, and he tried so many different ways. And Prahlad was not, he tried to throw him down a hill, and tried to burn him in a fire, and tried to boil him in a in a cauldron full of hot oil. He left him between snakes, and he tried elephants to trample over him. But at no point he tried to defend himself, because he has fully surrendered. And in that case, Krishna is directly taking charge of such a fully surrendered soul. So Lord has many different names. And so because Krishna has unlimited qualities, and there is a name for each of those qualities, and so Krishna has unlimited names. So if he, in particular pastime, he kills the demon Madhu, so he's known as Madhusudana, the killer of Madhu demon. Because he's son of Vasudeva, he's known as Vasudeva, which means the son of Vasudeva. He's also known as Devaki Nandan, which means the son of Devaki, Yashodanandan. But in this context, right, there could be many names, but as I say, the names are not randomly chosen. In this particular context, he's referred to as Rishikesh because he is directly giving direction to Arjuna personally, as we will see. That's why the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, and also as his chariot driver. And Arjuna is referred to as Dhananjaya. We talked about that because he had, he had conquered many kingdoms, and he had helped his elder brother Yudhishthir to perform the Rajasuya sacrifices in particular. And Bhima is mentioned, he had performed many Herculean tasks. The Mahabharata is full of all those tasks that Bhima could perform, no one else could perform. At one point in time when, the Pandavas had to go in exile, and they had to walk all night through the forest, dense dark forest, Bhima actually carried the entire family. He had Kunti on her shoulder, and Yudhishthir and Arjuna between his arms, hanging on his arms, and then he had Nakula Sahadev on his waist, and he was carrying them all night, and he was walking. Just one example. Then when they were living in Ek Chakra as a Brahmana disguise, there was this demon called Bakasura who had created a havoc, and then once in a month, I believe, or every week, I can't recall, like one villager had to send a cart load of food to Bakasura along with one human or one member of a family, and then the Asura would devour them. So Bhima, when the Kunti finds out, she volunteers Bhima to go so that the Brahmana does not have to sacrifice a member of his family, and then Bhima was easily able to defeat him. So in this way, there are many other pastimes which indicate the strength of Bhima. Okay, so the essence of this is there are transcendental indications which suggest that the Pandavas were destined to win. Okay, any questions? We move on. Okay, verses 16 to 18. Let me see if there was any particular comment by our acharyas. It's text 14. Here's also text 14. I think I might have opened another book here. So, library. This is the other book, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to go back to the original reference here. Oh, that's the next verse. Okay, so let's read on. So verses 16 through 18. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kuntiputro Yudhishthirah Nakulah Sahadevascha Sugosha Manipushpako Kashyascha Parameshvashah Sikhandi cha Maharathah Drishtadumno Viratascha Satyakis Chaparajitah Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasah Prithvipate Saubhadrascha Mahabahu Sankhan Dadmu Prithak Prithak. Translation: King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, believed his consul named Ananta Vijay. Nakula and Sadev believed the consuls named Shugosha and Manipushpak. The great archer, the king of Kashi, the great fighter Shikhandi, Drishtadumna, Virata, the unconquerable Satyaki, Drupad, the sons of Draupadi and others, O king, such as the mighty son of Subhadra, which is Abhimanyu, all believe their respective consuls. So here the description of the remaining warriors in the Pandava army blowing their respective consuls is described. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that here the Sanjaya was tactfully informing Dhritarashtra that all his life the policy that he was pursuing, where he was deceiving the sons of Pandu towards the rightful proprietorship over the kingdom, and he was trying to enthrone his own sons instead, was not very praiseworthy. And because he was siding adharma, it was clearly indicated that the whole Kuru dynasty would be killed, beginning with the grandsire Bhishma and down to Abhimanyu, grandsons like Abhimanyu. So this is the on one side. So you're talking about three generations. You have the Pandavas' grandfather, right, Bhishma, and then the other side you have the grandson Abhimanyu. So the entire, it's across multiple generations there will be loss of life, and including kings from many states of the world, and they were all present. They were all bound to be doomed, and the whole catastrophe was due to King Dhritarashtra encouraging his evil-spirited policy just to fulfill the ambitions of his son. And again, these are all transcendental symptoms where they were all blowing their conch shells. So this is verses 16 through 18. So over here in the verses 16 through 18, let me see if there is any other commentary. So I don't think there is any particular that is mentioned. Aparajitah. So that is the word used over here, right? Which means unconquerable. So if you go back to the verse, here it is mentioned here, see, who had never been vanquished. So there are warriors. These are all warriors which were mentioned over here. These warriors were never defeated in any war. So there is another qualification that we see on the side of the Pandavas. No such mention of their achievements is mentioned when, as far as the army of the Kauravas is concerned. Verse number 19. Sagosho Dharta Rashtra Hridayani Vyadarayat Navascha Prithvim Chaiva Tumulo Abhyanunadayan. Translation: the blowing of these conch shells became uproarious, vibrating both in the sky and on the earth. It shattered the hearts of the son of Dhritarashtra. Purport: when Bhishma and others on the side of Duryodhan blew their respective conch shells, there was no heart breaking on the part of the Pandavas. Such occurrences are not mentioned, but in this particular verse it is mentioned that the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra were shattered by the sounds vibrated by the Pandavas' party. This is due to the Pandavas and their confidence in Lord Krishna. One who takes the shelter of the Supreme Lord has nothing to fear, even in the midst of the greatest calamity. So it's pretty clear. There is this, we can see multiple indications where right from the beginning we see that there are signs of strong confidence and signs of victory on the side of the Pandavas, which we don't find on the side of the Kauravas. So the shattering of the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra, there's a very strong indication. It created fear. It instilled fear in the opponent army, while the Pandavas did not have any such feeling. And also, as I mentioned, when Bhishma blowed his conch shell, it was again half-hearted, right? He sounded as if like the roar of a lion. So he was not so much inclined. Of course, he knew what was right, what was wrong, and he also had a lot of affection towards the Pandavas. And later in Mahabharata war, we'll see that at one point Duryodhan really gets agitated and tells Bhishma that you like Arjuna so much that you are so much lenient to it. That's why you have not been able to kill him. Otherwise, if you want, you can just annihilate him easily. And so he basically hurts the ego of Bhishma, and then Bhishma says that tomorrow I'll show what I am capable to do. Tomorrow Arjuna won't leave. Or in order to save him, Krishna would have to break his promise that he would not pick up any weapon. And that's what happens. The next day, Bhishma basically showers Arjuna with such a deluge of arrows that Krishna knew that there is no way Arjuna will be able to survive. And then he will have to, jump in. And he does that. He breaks his promise just to save his devotees. So this is another indication why Krishna is Purna Purushottam, unlike Ram, who is Maryada Purushottam. So Ram had taken the vow of, the personality of Ram is that he acts within the bounds of morality, worldly morality. Of course, for the Lord, there is nothing immoral, right? He is absolute. That means he is not subject to mundane considerations of what is moral and immoral. But just goes to prove the point. It's just like Krishna, who is the supreme personality of Godhead, he did not have to become anyone's servant, but he became the servant of Arjuna by becoming his chariot driver. And it's accepting a lower position. Why is it a lower position? Well, one is you have to take orders. Another is not only you have to take orders when in the war, when there is so much sound and there is so much commotion, and you cannot even, if you're trying to say anything to your charioteer, the charioteer might not even listen because there is so much sound, right? There's so much noise. So sometimes the archer who is behind, they basically use their legs to give a kick to the charioteer and give some indication, go left, go right, I want you to do this. So there are signs. So basically here Arjuna, he would be hitting Krishna with his leg. Something we can't even imagine. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. But Krishna, why is he accepting that position? So we never see Vishnu, taking a subservient position, or even Rama. Rama is the king of Ayodhya, right? So there is a awe and reverence, there is majesty. But Krishna, he just appears like first of all as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan, and then he moves to Dwarka, but he himself never became the king. He installed Ugrasen as the king. And after the Mahabharata war, he installs Yudhishthir as the king. So he never, has taken that position of power. but he's always there to help his devotees. Here he takes a lower position, he becomes a chariot driver, and I think what was the point I was trying to say? I lost track of it. Yeah, so Krishna is yeah, there was the original point as I was trying to make, and I lost my Maryada Purushottam. So Krishna is not bound by worldly sense of morality. So he breaks his promise. Yes, thank you. So he breaks his promise just to say, for the sake of his devotee. Now people might criticize him forever for the rest of the eternity that, what kind of God is he? He can't even keep his promise. He talks about all this big morality in Bhagavad Gita and this and that, but he broke his promise. That somebody might question them, but he does not care. He says, for me, my devotee is more important. So that is Krishna. So he is Purna Purushottam. He is not Maryada Purushottam. Okay, any questions on this? Verse number 19. Just want to see if there is another important point. Okay, so move on to the next set of verses. Verse number 20. Atha vyavasthitan drishtva dhartarashtraन् kapidvajah pravritte sastra sampate dhanur udyamya pandavah rishikesham tada vakyam idam maha mahipate. Translation. At the time, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, seated in the chariot bearing the flag marked with Hanuman, took up his bow and prepared to shoot his arrows. O king, after looking at the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn in military array, Arjuna then spoke to Lord Krishna these words. Purport. The battle was just about to begin. It is understood from the above statement that the sons of Dhritarashtra were more or less disheartened by the unexpected arrangement of the military force by the Pandavas, who were guided by the direct instructions of Lord Krishna on the battlefield. So we discussed this, in the previous session, where the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas was Drishtadyumna. And this Drishtadyumna was the son of Drupad. Now, Drupad had an enmity against Dronacharya. And he begot this son specifically to kill Dronacharya. So he performed a special fire sacrifice, a homam, and he desired to have a son who is capable of killing Dronacharya, who is expert in military warfare. After he begot the son, he sent him to Dronacharya. Hey, Dronacharya, you are a Brahmana. I want you to teach my son the science of military warfare so that he can kill you. Right? And Dronacharya is a liberal Brahmana. A Brahmana is not interested in maintaining his livelihood. His duty is to impart knowledge without making any distinction. Only qualification he sees that is this person a Kshatriya Varna or not. That it's not meant to be taught to everyone. As long as one is Kshatriya, he doesn't care if this is whatever the student will learn will be used against me or not. He is not interested in personal favor. So Brahmana means Samadarshi. He sees everyone with equal vision, and he's not interested in personal sense gratification. That's why in the Varnashram society, in Sanatan Dharma, the Brahmanas, they accept a vow of poverty. They willingly take the vow of poverty because there is no conflict of interest. The Brahmanas are supposed to instruct the Kshatriyas. That means they have to speak the truth, not being worried about any consequences. Now, if they are taking a salary from the king, then they are obliged to the king. They might think that, oh, if I say the truth that he might not like, my salary will stop. So because they want genuine interest of the society, they will willingly accept poverty. So they don't accept salary and they live very simply. So similarly was the case with Dronacharya. There was a point in time where he was not even able to feed his son Ashwathama. In such an extreme poverty. And then that's when actually, he thinks of his friend Drupad, because both of them, were students in the same Gurukul when they were young. And Drupad had changed. So as a child, Drupad had told him that, when you grow up, I'll give you half of my kingdom. Now, Dronacharya was not interested in the kingdom, so he never approached Drupad. But when he was going through extreme poverty, he just approached Kshatriya, because another dharma of Brahmana is to ask for charity. Now, Drupad had changed, and he said, "What are you talking about? I didn't make any promise. There cannot be friendship between two unequals. Look at your status, look at mine." So Drupad had become very puffed up. So anyway, that's the history. But here, basically, Drishtadyumna finally, and along with Drupad, they joined the Pandava army, and Drishtadyumna, who had learned this military science from Dronacharya, was now using it against the Kauravas, and Duryodhana was not happy about it. And just the arrangement of the army, the phalanx, created so much fear in them. So that is mentioned over here. That's what Prabhupada is referring to. So that was one sign. The other sign was on the chariot of Arjuna was the emblem of Hanuman. And the charioteer was none other than Krishna, who is again Rama. Right? So Rama is an expansion of Krishna, so there is no difference between them. So both Rama and Arjuna are present. Right? Sorry, Rama and Hanuman, they are present, and to support Arjuna. And we know that Rama and Hanuman, their combination, their duo, they easily conquered Ravana. So similarly, in this war also, it's already it's determined that Arjuna and the Pandavas again would be victorious. These are all the signs. And Sita Devi is also present where Ram is present. And Sita is Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. And so all fortune and all victory is guaranteed for Arjuna. That's another sign for victory. And above all, the Lord is, Krishna is the Lord of all senses, also personally present. So these are all the different symptoms that are described. This was verse number 20. It's 20 to 23, right? Okay, so we'll read other verses. So let me read next verse. Any questions anyone has so far? I think we still have 30 minutes. We can go on. Verses 21 and 22. Arjuna uvacha senayor ubayor madhye ratham sthapaya me achyuta yavad etan niriksheham yodho kaman avasthitan kairmaya saha yodhavyam ashmin rana samudyame. Translation: Arjuna said, "O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies so that I may see those present here who desire to fight and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms." So here, after the conch shells are blown, and Arjun, now the conversation begins. So Arjuna, he says, "O infallible one." So he's referring Krishna as Achyuta. Achyuta means one who is fallible. So living entities, we are all Achyuta, means we are fallible. That means though we are spiritual fragments of absolute truth, so though we are parts and parcels of Krishna, we are subject to or prone to come under the influence of illusion. But Krishna is not like that. If Krishna is also prone to come under illusion, then he cannot be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there is no point of listening to Bhagavad Gita from Krishna if he is just like one of us, right? There is no point in listening to Bhagavad Gita from him. So that is the difference. So Krishna is referred to here as Achyuta, or the infallible one. Why is infallible one, right? So in the purport, it is later explained that so one is that overall Krishna is Achyuta, but in this context, what it means is that Arjuna is giving him instruction. What instruction he's giving him? He says, please draw my chariot between the two armies, right? Now, Krishna does not fail to execute this instruction, right? So in that sense, he is infallible. So here Prabhupada is mentioning that although Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he out of his causeless mercy was engaged in the service of his friend, right? He's taking a subordinate position. And he never fails in his affection for his devotees, and thus he is addressed as infallible, right? So he is infallible as far as his love and affection to the devotee is concerned. That is guaranteed. And for that, he might be apparently fallible in terms of breaking his promise if there is a higher cause, which is love and affection for his devotees. So he breaks his promise that he would never pick up a weapon in this war. He breaks that promise for the sake of his devotees. So he is infallible for his devotees. But as far as breaking the promise was concerned, you can say that he was fallible, right? But he cares more about his devotees. So if he has to pick between one or the two, then he will pick he's always take the side of his devotee. So that is the import. So Arjuna is giving him instruction, and he would not fail to execute. As a charioteer, he had to carry out the orders of Arjuna, and since he did not hesitate to do so, he is addressed as infallible. Although he had accepted the position of a charioteer for his devotee, it does not mean, so see, though he had accepted the position of a charioteer for his devotee, his supreme position was not challenged. So there are many examples. There are people who might be very powerful, and they might have important positions in the government or in big corporations, but at the home they are a family man, right, or a family member, and for the sake of their family members, they might even take a subordinate position, right? And they might take orders from their family members, in the sense that the child wants to ask his father to do something, or wife wants him to do something, that he would lovingly do that. And that might be a menial task, like go and throw out the garbage, right, or trash, or do something very menial. But for the sake of family members, there is no question of higher or lower. It's all affection. And by doing that, that doesn't mean that their position outside, whatever in the government or in the organization, that position is not affected just because they are taking a lower position. And somebody might be CEO of an organization, and just because that person is doing his own dishes doesn't mean that he ceases to become a CEO. So we should not think that, oh, Krishna is a charioteer of Arjuna, is just an ordinary person, right? So his position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not affected at all. Relationship between the Lord and his servitor is very sweet and transcendental. The servitor is always ready to render service to the Lord, and similarly the Lord is always seeking an opportunity to render some service to the devotees. So there is a mutual exchange, like especially in Vrindavan, where we see different gopas and gopis. They are always very eager to serve Krishna, and Krishna is always very eager to serve them. And there is no question of master or servant, right? So the mood in Vrindavan is that of either friendship, either parental affection, or conjugal love. So Yashoda and Nanda and all other elder residents of Vrindavan, they were all parents to Krishna, and they would sometimes chastise him, and they would love him, they would serve him. And the gopas and the gopis, they would also serve Krishna, but Krishna would serve them in return. And so in this way, there is a mutual, very loving kind of exchange of service. So he takes great pleasure in his pure devotees assuming the advantageous position of ordering him than he does in being the giver of the orders, you see. So there is a different kind of pleasure, right? Just like we experience in our life also. Sometimes the example of the family members that I said, right? One might be an important person outside, but they take more pleasure in serving their family members by doing a menial task. And so where is that coming from? Everything comes from the Supreme Lord himself. Whatever we have within ourselves, we should understand that it comes from the Supreme Lord. Now, in our cases, that desire or some personality trait might be perverted, might be corrupted, but we understand that there is a pure form of it, and that pure form of it resides in the Supreme Lord. Since he is the master, everyone is under his orders, and no one is above him to order him. But when he finds that a pure devotee is ordering him, he obtains transcendental pleasure, although he is infallible master in all circumstances. Yeah. So this is just further elaboration of Krishna's willingness to serve his devotees. Many different examples. Another example is Sudama. When Sudama he comes to Dwarka, he approaches Krishna, and again, being a Brahmana, having accepted the vow of poverty, he was living very simply, and he did not mind poverty. But of course, his wife also had to face a lot of difficulties. And again, there was he's going through an extremely challenging time, and his wife said to Sudama that why don't you go and ask something from your friend Krishna? He's in Dwarka, not very far. Sudama was living in Porbandar. So Porbandar is in Saurashtra, again the coast of on the coast, is not very far from Dwarka. So Sudama goes. Of course, Sudama, he thought, I'm not going to ask anything to Krishna. I don't want. So Brahmanas are very simple-hearted. But I have not seen my friend in a long time. I might as well go and see him. And when Sudama enters Dwarka, and now he was very fragile and very thin. All the bones in his body were visible because he did not have proper diet, and all the veins in his body were also visible, and he was wearing dirty, torn clothes. And when he approached the palace of Krishna, he passed through all the gates, the city of gold, Dwarka, extremely exquisitely beautiful, made up of corals and marbles. He approaches the palace, and as soon as Krishna knows that Sudama has come, he was talking with Rukmini. He leaves everything aside and he rushes to the entrance to personally welcome Sudama. His pitambar is falling off, his upavastra is falling off. He does not care. He goes and holds Sudama's hand personally. Holding his hand, he brings him inside, makes him sit on his own throne, and then he washes his feet with water, and the water from the washed feet, he takes the water and puts it on his head. See, this is the proper etiquette for welcoming any guest, but especially Brahmanas. And then he makes him sit on his personal bedstead, where he sleeps. And then he massages him, and goddess of fortune Rukmini herself is taking a chamar in her hand, a fan, and she is personally serving Sudama. And in this way, we can see, how Krishna, for the sake of his devotee, he takes such a, humble position. And so the thing about God is, God does not like to be worshipped as God. People in a lot of different religions, they have this understanding of, they create in the way they describe God as someone who is always judging people and sending them to hell or heaven for rest of the eternity, and is demanding worship, and that's a very perverted, or there's some partial truth in the sense that God is supreme, but he is not interested in so much in all this adoration. And of course, if you say pleasing words, who does not like it? But that's not what the spiritual life is. In spiritual life, the devotees, they don't even know that Krishna is the supreme personality of God. They are made to forget so that they can intimately associate with Krishna. So that's what we should understand. So as a pure devotee of the Lord, Arjuna had no desire to fight with his cousins and brothers, but he was forced to come onto the battlefield by the obstinacy of Duryodhana. was never agreeable to any peaceful negotiation. So there are many instances where Pandavas basically tried to strike a peace deal with Duryodhan, to the extent that they said that, hey, we are Kshatriyas, we need to follow our Kshatriya dharma, which means we have to rule. So we are not interested in having big kingdoms that we want to rule over. Just give us 5 villages. We are not even asking for towns or cities, just village. One village for one of our brothers. So we want 5 villages. He's and Duryodhan said, I wouldn't even give you a piece of land where which is enough to poke a needle. And so we see that the obstinacy was on the part of Duryodhan. And so there was no question of peacemaking on the battlefield. But again, he wanted to see them again. So he wanted to, that's why he asked Krishna, hey, take the chariot between the battlefield. And I really want to see who has assembled. I know Kauravas are headed by Duryodhan is assembled, but he wants to see who else is there to support the evil-minded Duryodhan, right? He just wanted to have a look. And there were other reasons he also wanted to have a look, which would be apparent in the next verse. So it was verse number 21 to 22. Any questions anyone has on this one? Okay. Verse number 23. Yotsyamanan aveksheham yayete atra samagataha dharta rashtrasya durbuddher yuddhe priya chikir savaha. Translation. Let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded son Dhritarashtra, evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. Purport. It was an open secret that Duryodhan wanted to usurp the kingdom of the Pandavas by evil plans, in collaboration with his father Dhritarashtra. Therefore, all persons who had joined the side of Duryodhan must have been the birds of the same feather. So in English, we have this saying, right? Birds of feather flock together. So you want to know what kind of a person someone is, then we should just look at the kind of company or association that person is having. And just by that, one can determine the nature of that person. So same thing, the same logic applies over here. So Arjuna wanted to see all those who were supporting Duryodhan on the battlefield before the fight was about to begin, just to learn who they were, but he had no intention of proposing peace or negotiations with them. It was also a fact that he wanted to see them to make an estimate of the strength which he had to face, although he was quite confident of the victory because Krishna was sitting by his side. So two purposes. One is he wanted to see who were there to support Duryodhan, and also in Niti Shastra it is said that one should know the strength and weaknesses of your army or the opponents before engaging with in a duel or a war or any kind of competition. One should know the strength and weaknesses. Like even in sports, in the present age, we see any kind of sport, whether it's tennis or football or soccer. What different teams do, they spend hours studying the techniques and the style of the opponents. How they are, whether it's cricket or soccer. What their maneuver is. How they play, and they observe all that. Why? So that they know what their strengths are, weaknesses are, and how they could be overcome. The same thing obviously applies in the case of warfare as well. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning over here in verse number 23. Okay, so that's 23. Verse number 24. Sanjaya uvacha evam ukto rishikesho gudakeshena bharata senayor ubayor madhye sthapayitva rathottamam. Translation: Sanjaya said, "O descendant of Bharat, having thus been addressed by Arjuna, Lord Krishna drove up the fine chariot in the midst of the armies of both parties." So, yeah, this is a very interesting verse. There are different meanings of the names for Krishna and Arjuna which are described over here, and the acharyas have analyzed it in much more detail, and it just gives so much in-depth understanding of the mood in which one can understand the scriptures. There's so much bhav. So let's see what those explanations are. In this verse, Arjuna is referred to as Guda Kesha. Gudaka means sleep, and one who conquers sleep is called Gudakesha. Sleep also means ignorance. So Gudaka has two meanings. One is sleep, another is ignorance. Arjuna had conquered both sleep and ignorance because of his friendship with Krishna. As a great devotee of Krishna, he could not forget Krishna even for a moment, because that is the nature of a devotee. Either in waking or in sleeping, a devotee of the Lord can never be free from thinking of Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. Thus, a devotee of Krishna can conquer both sleep and ignorance simply by thinking of Krishna constantly. This is called Krishna consciousness or samadhi. So here the explanation of how Krishna was Gudakesha is referred. Now, we see that, not Krishna, how Arjuna is Gudakesha is explained. Now, we also see that Arjuna, as a disciple in Dronacharya's ashram, he was so interested in learning the archery, he would practice sometimes all night, right? So another thing we can understand in that regard is that when one is fixed in determination, the only thing they have in their mind is their goal, right? And then when we are driven by that goal, we conquer sleep. So that's one level of understanding, but ultimately the proper spiritual understanding is what Srila Prabhupada explained over here, where he's saying Arjuna had conquered both sleep and ignorance, right, because of his friendship with Krishna. Now, if you see Krishna, he is referred to as Rishikesha. So both words, they have similar forms. Rishika means senses, and Ishaha means controller. So Krishna is referred to as the controller of the senses, and Arjuna is also referred to as similar word, which is Gudaka Ishaha. So both words have Ishaha. Krishna is also Ishaha, Arjuna is also Ishaha. So Ishaha means controller, or you can also say Ishvara. It comes from the same root. Isha means controller. But what are they controller of? Krishna is referred to as the controller of senses, right, Rishikesha, and Arjuna is referred to as the controller or the conqueror of both sleep and ignorance. So we read the meaning of what does it mean to be controller of ignorance in regard to the name that is used for Arjuna. Now, when it comes to Krishna, he is referred to as Rishikesha, or the director of the senses and mind of every living entity. But specifically here, in the case, this case, it refers to Krishna could understand Arjuna's purpose in placing the chariot in the midst of the armies. Thus he did so and then spoke as follows. Right? So now Krishna knows what's going to happen. Once Arjuna goes in the middle of the battlefield, he would be overcome with anxiety, and apparently he would be influenced by ignorance. Why? So that Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. Now we should not understand that Arjuna is not an ordinary person. Why? Who is Krishna and Arjuna? Krishna, Arjuna, and Arjuna are Nar and Narayan. They are divine personalities, right? So Nara is Arjuna and Narayan is Krishna. So they are not ordinary persons. Actually, Arjuna is an eternal associate of the Lord, right? Krishna has a lot of eternal associates in spiritual world, right? So we see Vasudev, Devki, Yashoda, Nand Maharaj, the Gopas, Gopis, they are eternally present with Krishna in the spiritual world also. So over here we see that Krishna and Arjuna, they are described, right? They are not ordinary person. So Arjuna would apparently come under ignorance after looking at the armies, and then he would express his anxiety and distress, so just so that Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. Now when he comes in under the ignorance, where do ignorance resides? Ignorance resides in the mind and also in the senses, right? Sometimes, when we are overcome by illusion and ignorance, our senses, they don't know, they sort of stop functioning, and mind is full of anxiety. Now that's the sign of ignorance. So what this is trying to say is that because Krishna is present with him and Krishna is the controller of the senses, the apparent ignorance of Arjuna would be overcome. And once it is overcome, Arjuna, his original and the eternal identity of Gudakshena, to be able to conquer ignorance, would be again re-established. So Arjuna is always Gudakshena, but apparently, if for a time being he would, come under the influence of ignorance for Bhagavad Gita to be spoken, and Krishna would remove the ignorance as a Rishikesha. And so that's why that is the import of these two words being used simultaneously at the same time. And you see these two words, they both have the same formation, right? Ishaha. So one is Rishika Ishaha, another is Gudaka Ishaha. Both are controllers. Any questions on this so far? Somebody's trying to say something? I heard some sound. If anyone's trying to say something, you can say it loudly. I'm just going through some commentary by acharyas, if there is anything else they commented on that could be. Yeah, there is another beautiful meaning over here. Yeah, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Let's go through this. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives another meaning of Gudakesha. So what he has done, he has broken down the word slightly different. So instead of Gudaka Ishaha, he's saying Guda plus Akesha. And then Akesha he has broken down into three different parts. So A meaning Vishnu. So this is root words. How A is Vishnu, you have to go much deeper into grammatical roots, but we are not doing that. Brahma, and then Akesha, Ka refers to Brahma and Isha refers to Shiva. So Gudakesha means Arjuna is one who is giving pleasure to Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva. Akesha, all three of them. What pleasure he is giving? He is giving them the experience of sweetness of the Lord's affection. And what is the sweetness? Guda. So in many Indian languages we say good. Guda is jaggery. Jaggery is sweet. And what is that sweetness? The sweetness is that Krishna took the order. He became the servant of Arjuna. He became the charioteer of Arjuna. And that is attractive even to Vishnu. Because you see, though Vishnu is non-different from Krishna, he is an expansion of Krishna, the form of Vishnu is in awe and reverence. He is the king of Vaikuntha. And because he is always worshipped in awe and reverence, Vishnu does not have the opportunity to experience friendship like Krishna is experiencing the devotion, exchange of love and affection with his devotee who is in the mood of friendship, Arjuna. But who can be the friend of Vishnu? Vishnu is the king of Vaikuntha. Who can be the friend of a king, right? So even Vishnu is attracted by that sweetness. So when Vishnu is seeing that, wow, Krishna has become a charioteer of Arjuna, it is giving even Vishnu pleasure. And Brahma and Shiva are also observing, and they are overpowered or overcome by sweetness like that of a Guda. So that is another interpretation of the word Gudakesha that we find in this commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who's been one of the great acharyas in Gaudiya line of Sampradaya. Let me see if there is another meaning. So see, is a Vishnu's attraction to Krishna's sweetness is illustrated by these words of Lord of spiritual sky, Mahavishnu. So there's another pastime later on where actually in Dwarka, there is a Brahmana whose son, one after another, for no apparent reason, as soon as that Brahmana begot a child, his son's born, the son would die, and no one can determine why that is happening. And so Arjuna says, I'm going to protect. I'm going to, next time this happens, I'll be personally present. I have conquered all the worlds, and there's no one who can stop me. And though Arjuna is present throughout, outside watching the home of the Brahmana, just to see who is coming to take the soul away, and Arjuna is not able to observe anyone. And again, the son dies, and the Brahmana is angry. He actually satirically comments on Arjuna. You were saying so many big things, and I am the holder of Gandiva, and I have conquered this and that, and what happened? You're not able to protect. And so now Arjuna is overcome by anxiety. So Krishna and Arjuna, they mount on their chariot, and they go to regions where no one has gone. They cross the boundaries of the entire Bhumandala. They go beyond Loka Varsa, where there is no life. They go up, break the shells, the 7 layers of the universe, and go to where Mahavishnu is lying in the Karunadak ocean. And they find that the Mahavishnu had actually, he was taking away the sons of Brahmana as soon as they were born. Why? Because Mahavishnu wanted to see Krishna appears on this earth only once in a day of Brahma, that is billions of years. In one day of Brahma, there are 1000 cycles of 4 yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali. Right? And then, each cycle is about 4.3 million years. And when Krishna personally comes in this world, then he gives a trailer or a glimpse of the pastimes loving pastimes that he eternally performs in Goloka Vrindavan. So even Mahavishnu does not have that experience, who is beyond the jurisdiction of the 3 modes of nature. Sattva, Raja, Tama is beyond that. So he actually wants to have darshan of Krishna and Arjuna. So that's why he was, this was his trick by which to call them. Obviously, then he gives those sons of Brahmana back after having that personal association. But the point being, as the sweetness of Krishna is such that even Vishnu is attracted by him. So that's another meaning of Gudakesha that is explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Having said that, I think I will end the class over here. We can continue from verse 25 in our next session. Anyone has any questions or comments? This would be a good time. Okay. One of the participants had requested, if we could do the class in the morning. Again, unless overwhelmingly everyone prefers, morning time, I think we can continue with the current timings. But if you have a strong preference, please reach out to me over WhatsApp. Otherwise, we'll continue with the current timings, which is 5 p.m. Pacific. Okay, any further questions or comments? If not, we will end the class over here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.